I confronted my brother after he forged my signature and stole money. Now my whole family is divided. Am I the bad guy? This happened recently and I'm still processing it. I never thought I'd be writing one of these, but I honestly don't know where else to turn. I'm a 43-year-old guy, husband, dad, and apparently now I'm the bad guy in my own family. The story centers around my younger brother Thomas, who's 18. Yeah, I know the age gap is huge. He was basically a moved baby, and my parents always treated him like their miracle child. I was already out of high school when he was born, so I've always felt more like a second father to him than a brother. But the truth is, Thomas and I have never been close in the way people imagine brothers should be. I've tried. God knows I've tried. When he was little, I was the one who bought him his first set of toy cars, and I can still remember him lining them up on the living room carpet, making little engine noises. Back then I thought maybe we'd get close despite the gap. But as he grew up, he got more distant. Maybe spoiled is the word. He knew how to get what he wanted out of our parents, and I always ended up being the boring adult telling him no. Last Christmas is a good example. We had the whole family together. My wife had been saving this expensive bottle of wine from our anniversary. It was supposed to be special, just for us. Somehow Thomas got into it with his friend, and by the time I realised, half the bottle was gone. When I confronted him, he just smirked and said, "Relax, Josh, it's just wine." I let it go, but I felt this pit in my stomach. That wasn't the first time he'd crossed a line, but it felt different. Fast forward to a few months ago. I remember the day exactly because at 2:30 p.m. I was at the hospital with my father. He'd had a fall, and I was sitting in that waiting room surrounded by the smell of disinfectant, stressing about medical bills. My phone buzzed with a notification, an $89 grocery bill charged to my account. Weird, but I figured maybe my wife had just gone shopping. I put it out of my mind. Then more charges appeared. Small at first, $20 here, $45 there. But within weeks, I was looking at withdrawals in the thousands. I thought it was a bank error. When I called, they told me the transactions looked legitimate. In fact, they had signatures my signature. Only they weren't mine. When I went into the bank, I'll never forget the shock of realizing the manager, a guy I'd known for years, had been helping me authorize transactions. Except it wasn't me. It was Thomas. My own little brother, forging my name and draining my account. When I confronted him in his dorm room, the conversation still replays in my head. Me, Thomas, did you take money from my account? Him laughing at first. What, are you serious? Me, don't play games, the bank showed me the signatures. Him shouting, so what if I did? You're loaded compared to me, I just needed help. Me, you stole from me, that's not help. Him, stop acting like some saint, you've never had to worry like I do, I just did what I had to. I can't even explain how that felt. Like someone punched me in the chest. My own brother, who I'd tried to help his whole life, casually admitting he'd forged my name. And here's where the real dilemma starts. When I told my parents, instead of being horrified, they turned on me. My mom actually said, "He's just a kid, Joshua, you're ruining his future over a mistake." My dad said, "You can afford it, let it go." My wife is the only one backing me, saying I need to protect our family. But now the entire family, extended relatives included, are calling me heartless for even thinking about pressing charges or demanding repayment. My boss even pulled me into HR because apparently Thomas used my card to buy stuff that ended up on my work account, and now my job performance is under review. I feel cornered. On one hand, Thomas crossed a line you don't just forgive. On the other, maybe I should have handled it differently. Maybe I shouldn't have blown up in front of him at his dorm. Maybe I should have just worked it out privately. I don't even know if I'm making sense here. I'm literally shaking as I type this. Was I really that out of line? I honestly can't tell anymore. After the confrontation in Thomas's dorm, things spiraled faster than I could keep up with. I thought that once I laid the truth bare, literally showing him the forged signatures, that he'd show some kind of remorse. Instead, he doubled down. The next morning, I got a call from the bank telling me that another transaction had gone through, even though I'd already told them to freeze my account. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about Thomas messing up once. This was something bigger. Here's where things get twisted. When I went back into the branch, I brought the bank statement and asked the manager, point blank, "Why are these transactions still going through when I told you to block them?" He hesitated, like visibly squirmed. Then he admitted, "Thomas came in with you last time, right? He said he had power of attorney for your account. We verified." I swear to God my jaw hit the floor. First of all, I never gave him power of attorney. Second, how could they verify something that didn't exist? I demanded to see the paperwork, and sure enough, there it was, my name, my signature, but not my handwriting. He had forged legal documents. And somehow the bank manager just let it slide because it looked close enough. When I brought this home to my wife, she was furious. Not at me at them. She said, "This isn't just theft, Josh, this is fraud, identity theft. If you don't handle this, he'll ruin more than just your bank account." And she was right. But when I told my parents, completely different story. My mom's exact words were, "You're exaggerating. You always make Thomas out to be worse than he is." I said, "Mom, he forged legal documents. That's a crime." She just sighed and said, "He's 18. He's a kid. Kids make mistakes. You made mistakes at his age too." That's when I lost it. My mistakes didn't involve draining my brother's account and lying to a bank. I snapped. She just gave me that look, the one that says I've crossed the line, like I'm the problem. Then my dad chimed in with, "You have a stable job, a house, a family. You don't understand how hard it is starting out today. Maybe you felt desperate." That one hit me harder than I'd like to admit, because part of me knows what it's like to struggle. Back when my kids were toddlers, There was a month where I couldn't even cover an $89 grocery bill. I remember digging through the couch cushions, trying to scrape enough cash together for bread and milk. So yeah, I get desperation. But I didn't steal from family. I took side jobs, I sold stuff on Craigslist, I did what I had to. And here's the kicker, while I was dealing with all this, my boss called me into HR. He said there were performance issues showing up on my expense account. I didn't even know what he meant until he showed me receipts, gaming consoles, headphones, random electronics, all charged under my corporate card. Thomas had somehow linked my personal info to my work account. HR told me if I didn't resolve it immediately, my job was at risk. So now I'm not only dealing with family drama, but my career is literally on the line. When I confronted Thomas again, I asked him why. Why take it this far? His response still makes my blood boil. Because you've always had it easy, Josh. You don't get what it's like. This is just evening the playing field. Evening the playing field. As if stealing from me somehow corrected the fact that I worked my ass to skess off for everything I've built. And still, the family whispers keep circling. My aunt called me the other night saying, "You're older, Joshua. You should be the bigger man. Don't ruin your brother's life over money." But it's not just money anymore. It's my name, my career, my reputation. The worst part? I keep wondering if they're right. If maybe I should have just swallowed the loss, cancelled everything quietly and moved on. Because now every move I make feels like I'm digging Thomas's grave deeper, and everyone sees me as the executioner. My wife keeps telling me I need to stand firm, but my parents act like I'm some cold, heartless machine who only cares about dollars and cents. I'm caught between protecting my own family and not being the villain in theirs. And I can't shake this thought, what if pressing charges really does ruin his future? What if I'm the reason he never gets a job, never finishes school, and never climbs out of this? But then again, what if letting him off just teaches him he can keep doing it? I don't even know where the line is anymore. I thought things couldn't get more complicated, but I was wrong. After the whole HR fiasco, I tried to go into damage control mode. I cancelled every card, locked down my credit, even put alerts on my accounts. I thought I was finally a step ahead of Thomas. But then the real fallout started. People outside my immediate family began getting involved. It started with my cousin Jenna. She called me one evening, out of nowhere, saying, "Why are you trying to destroy Thomas's life? He told me everything. He said you're threatening to press charges just because he borrowed a little money without asking." Borrowed. That word nearly made me laugh, except it wasn't funny. Borrowing implies intent to return, and Thomas had shown zero signs of wanting to pay me back. I tried explaining to her, he forged my name on bank documents. That's not borrowing, that's fraud. But she just sighed and said, "You've always been hard on him. He told me you never treated him like family." That was stung. Because I did treat him like family. Maybe not in the same spoiled way my parents did, but I was the one buying him school supplies when my parents forgot, or slipping him cash when he wanted to go out with friends. I thought those things mattered. Apparently not. Meanwhile, things at work kept unraveling. My boss pulled me aside again, saying, "We need this cleared up immediately, Joshua. If this continues, your position here is in jeopardy." I tried explaining that it wasn't me making those purchases, but even as the words came out of my mouth, I could see the skepticism in his eyes. Because to him, it looked like excuses. At this point, I was exhausted. My depression medication, which usually helps me keep an even keel, had basically stopped working. I'd wake up with this pit in my stomach, this heavy fog over everything. I'd sit in my car before work, gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince myself I wasn't about to lose everything I'd built. The breaking point came when I learned the bank manager hadn't just looked the other way. He had actually coached Thomas on how to fill out the forms. A whistleblower and employee at the branch called me after hours. She said she couldn't watch what was happening anymore, that she saw the manager walking Thomas through the paperwork. That detail made my blood run cold. Because it meant this wasn't just my brother being reckless, it was an adult enabling him, giving him the keys to burn down my financial life. I confronted my parents again with this information, thinking maybe now they'd see reason. Instead, my mom doubled down. "So now you're going after a man's career because you want revenge. Do you even hear yourself?" I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't help it. "Revenge? Mom, this is about my kid's college fund, my mortgage, my career. Do those things mean nothing to you?" She just shook her head and said, "You're supposed to be the strong one. Joshua, that's your role. Don't drag Thomas down with you." That line hit me harder than anything else. Be the strong one. That's been the expectation my whole life. Provide. Protect. Endure. But how am I supposed to protect my own family when my brother is the one tearing everything apart? To make matters worse, Thomas started playing the victim card with everyone else. He told people I was bullying him, that I had always looked down on him, that I couldn't stand to see him succeed. And people bought it. One of my uncles even texted me, "Maybe you're jealous of him. He's young, he has opportunities you didn't have." Jealous? Of the kid who forged my name, wrecked my finances, and laughed in my face when I confronted him. I admit I snapped at Thomas the last time we spoke. I told him, "If you don't come clean, I'll have no choice but to take this to the police." His response? He leaned back in his chair, smiled, and said, "Do it. They'll never believe you over me." And the terrifying part is I think he might be right. With my parents backing him, with half my family convinced I'm out to ruin him, with my boss already doubting me, I don't know who would actually believe me. Part of me thinks I should press forward no matter what. The other part wonders if I'm walking into a trap where I end up the villain no matter what I do. I keep asking myself, is protecting my family worth becoming the enemy in everyone else's eyes? Or should I just eat the loss, stay silent, and hope Thomas eventually grows up? Because right now, I can't see a way out where I don't look like the bad guy. After Thomas told me, "They'll never believe you over me," I couldn't sleep for nights. His words kept echoing in my head. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. The way things were playing out, it was like I was already cast as the villain. My wife, Sarah, tried to reassure me. One night, as I sat at the kitchen table staring at a pile of bank statements, she put her hand on mine and said, "Josh, you're not crazy. He didn't do anything wrong. We just need to stick together." But even as she said it, I could see the worry in her eyes. This wasn't just about the money anymore, it was bleeding into every corner of our lives. She's been patient, but I can tell the stress is getting to her. The kids have started noticing too. Our oldest asked me why I was so grumpy all the time, and I didn't know what to say. I just told him Daddy was tired from work. But the truth? I was falling apart inside. The day it all came to a head, I was driving home from work when my phone rang. It was Sarah, panicked. She said, "Josh, you need to come home right now. Someone was at the door asking about the money." My stomach dropped. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a piece of paper stuck to our door, an overdue notice on a credit line I didn't even know existed. Turned out Thomas had opened accounts in my name. Not just one. 3. At this point, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I sat there in the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My depression, meds weren't touching this level of stress anymore. I felt completely raw. That night, Sarah and I argued. Not because she blamed me, but because she was scared. "Josh, what if he drags us under? What if we lose the house? What if the kids can't go to college?" I didn't have answers. For the first time in our marriage, I saw real fear in her eyes when she looked at me, like maybe I couldn't protect her or the kids anymore. And that cut me deeper than anything Thomas had done. The next morning, I decided I couldn't just sit back. I called my parents again, thinking maybe if I spelled it out clearly, they'd finally understand. I laid everything out, the forged documents, the fake accounts, the whistleblower's testimony, the overdue notices. My dad just sighed and said, "Josh, you're making too big a deal out of this. Banks make mistakes all the time." That was it. I lost it. I yelled, louder than I ever have at him in my life, "This isn't the bank's mistake. Dad, this is Thomas. He's wrecking my life, and you're just letting him." There was silence on the other end. Then my mom said, very quietly, "You need to calm down. Joshua, you sound unhinged." Unhinged. That's the word she used. Not betrayed, not hurt, not even angry. Unhinged. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. But the damage was done. Later that evening, I got texts from my aunt and even a family friend saying they'd heard I was losing it and harassing Thomas. That's when it clicked. He was spinning the narrative faster than I could keep up. I tried to focus on work, but my boss pulled me into HR again. This time, they mentioned a pattern of questionable expenses that went back months. Things I had never seen before. When I tried to explain, I could feel myself rambling, trying to make sense of the mess. I must have sounded desperate because the HR rep gave me this pitying look and said, "Maybe you should take some time off, Joshua." And here's the thing, maybe I do sound desperate. Maybe I do sound like a man unraveling. Because that's exactly what I am right now. The strain is showing in my marriage too. Sarah tries to be supportive, but I caught her crying in the bathroom the other night. She tried to hide it, but I heard her whispering, "What if he can't fix this?" And I don't blame her for doubting me. I'm doubting me too. Part of me wants to just cut Thomas off, completely report him, let the chips fall within me. But another part keeps hesitating. Because once I take that step, there's no going back. He's still my brother. He's still the kid I once bought toy cars for. And yet every day I don't act feels like another nail in the coffin of my marriage, my career, my sanity. I don't know how much longer I can keep carrying this. After days of sleepless nights and endless phone calls with the bank, I finally decided to take legal steps. I set up a meeting with a lawyer who specializes in identity theft and fraud. Walking into that office, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I was finally doing something. Dread because I knew this would open a whole new front in the war I was already losing at home. The lawyer explained the process in a calm, measured voice. "We can file a police report, freeze any new accounts, and demand restitution," she said. I nodded, scribbling notes. "How long will this take?" I asked. "Months," she said. "Maybe a year or more. Your brother will have to be served, and then there's the investigation." I remember thinking, a year? A year of this hanging over me? But at that point, I didn't care. I couldn't keep waiting for Thomas to decide whether he'd change on his own. When I told Sarah, she hugged me tight. "Finally," she whispered. "We can start protecting ourselves." But that evening, when I told my parents, the reaction was immediate and brutal. "Mom, Joshua, you can't do this. You'll ruin him forever." "Dad, he's just a kid. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." I tried to explain the severity, forged signatures, stolen money, legal documents. I even mentioned the whistleblower from the bank. But it was like talking to a brick wall. My parents refused to see him as anything more than their baby making mistakes. Thomas, of course, didn't sit quietly. He knew the moment I involved a lawyer, the narrative could swing either way. He started texting friends, claiming I was trying to destroy his future over petty money. And people believed him. Friends I didn't even know were calling my phone, asking if it was true. The emotional toll hit me fast. My depression medication might as well have been sugar pills. I couldn't focus at work, I couldn't eat properly, and even moments with my kids felt hollow. Watching them play with their toy cars, the same ones I'd bought Thomas years ago, felt like a cruel reminder that some bonds you can't protect. Then came the confrontation at my parents' house. I'd driven out to talk to Thomas one last time before involving the police. He met me in the living room, smirking like he owned the place. "But Josh," he said, leaning back on the couch. "You're really going to press charges over this?" "Yes," I said, for a steady but cold. "You forged my signature, stole money, and jeopardized my job. This isn't negotiable." He laughed, not even trying to hide it. "You always were the serious one, but hey, maybe this will finally teach you humility." I froze. Humility? I was supposed to learn humility because he committed fraud. I wanted to grab him, shake him, scream until he understood the gravity of what he'd done. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not in front of my parents. Mom tried to mediate. Joshua, can't you just let it go? She pleaded. I shook my head. I can't. I'm trying to protect myself, my family, and you're asking me to ignore the law? Dad stayed silent this time, which somehow felt worse than arguing. By the end of the night, Thomas stormed off, slamming the door, while my parents sat on the couch staring at me with that same disapproving look. It was as if I had done something wrong. Over the next week, the tension reached a boiling point. Texts from relatives, whispers at family gatherings, even a neighbour asking if I was handling things too harshly. Everyone seemed to think I was the asshole. Only Sarah and my lawyer were on my side, and even then, I felt isolated. I started questioning myself constantly. Was I overreacting? Maybe involving the law was extreme. Maybe I was being petty. But then I remembered the stolen money, the forged signatures, the accounts he opened under my name. I remembered the panic, the sleepless nights, the threats to my career. Every time I doubted myself, though, Thomas smiled, knowing he'd already sown doubt in everyone around me. It's exhausting. It's terrifying. And I don't know if I have the emotional bandwidth to go through a legal battle while trying to keep my marriage and my family intact. I can't tell anymore if I'm being a protective older brother or responsible father, or just the villain in everyone else's story. After filing the initial paperwork with the lawyer, I thought maybe I'd finally feel some sense of control. I was wrong. Almost immediately, the fallout hit harder than I expected. Thomas didn't just stop with the bank accounts, he began targeting my credit. New accounts were being opened in my name faster than I could shut them down. Every morning, I woke up to alerts and emails that made my stomach sink. A $500 charge here, a $1,200 loan there. It was relentless. I tried to compartmentalize to keep my family and work separate from the chaos, but it was impossible. I'm 43. I've always prided myself on being the provider, the strong one. But watching my credit and reputation crumble under my own brother's hands made me feel powerless in a way I never have before. I remember sitting in the car one night, parked outside the kids' school, gripping the steering wheel, thinking, is this what failure feels like? Sarah has been my anchor, but even she's starting to fray. The kids sense tension, even if they don't understand why. My oldest asked last week, Daddy, why do you look worried all the time? I just shrugged, forcing a smile, pretending everything was fine. But it's not fine. Nothing about this is fine. Then there's work. HR started sending weekly warnings, implying my pattern of financial discrepancies could affect my promotion and even continued employment. My boss hasn't afraid to accuse me of anything, but the doubt in his eyes is palpable. I know he thinks I might be hiding something or mismanaging company resources. I tried to explain that Thomas was responsible, but again, it sounds like excuses. And now, even my professional reputation is on the line. Family gatherings have become a minefield. Everyone seems to have taken sides or worse, assumed I'm the villain. My aunt told me straight up at the barbecue, Joshua, sometimes you push too hard, Thomas is young, and you're just overreacting. I tried to explain, voice shaking, he forged my signature, stole money, opened accounts under my name. She just shook her head. That's not how I see it. The pressure started affecting my health. My depression medication completely stopped working. Nights are the worst, lying awake, heart racing, replaying every argument, every betrayal, every sneering text from Thomas. I've started snapping at Sarah and the kids over minor things, and the guilt eats me alive afterward. I feel like I'm failing in every role I've ever taken seriously. Father, husband, brother, son. Then the strangest thing happened. A whistleblower from the bank, someone who had remained anonymous for weeks, finally called. She revealed that Thomas had been coached not just by the branch manager, but by someone higher up in a corporate chain. They'd given him detailed instructions on how to make transactions appear legitimate and even advise him on how to forge documents without triggering alerts. That blew me away. I knew my brother was smart, manipulative even, but I didn't realize the bank had been complicit to this extent. I confronted Thomas again over the phone. I asked him, calmly, do you even realize how far this has gone? He laughed. Of course I do, and I don't care. I remember gripping the receiver so hard my fingers hurt. You're destroying me, my family, my career, my life. Relax, he said. You're overreacting, people will blame you anyway. He was right. People are blaming me. Extended family, friends, even some coworkers have started whispering behind my back, questioning my judgment. It's like the universe itself is conspiring to make me the villain. I don't know what's worse, the theft itself or the way Thomas has turned the narrative against me. Every step I take to protect my family, every call to the bank or lawyer, every attempt to confront him, it's like I'm digging my own grave. And yet part of me knows I can't just let him walk away. Not when he's affecting my life so directly, not when he's jeopardizing my kid's future, not when he's made me question everything I believed about family and loyalty. I'm caught between rage and self-doubt, action and inaction. Between the brother I once loved and the frosty he's become. Between standing up for myself and becoming the villain that everyone already believes I am. I'm starting to wonder if there's even a right choice anymore. By this point, I was emotionally running on fumes. Every day felt like walking through a minefield. Thomas didn't just stop with accounts and documents, he escalated in ways that caught me off guard. Small, cruel things at first, emails to my clients with subtle insinuations that I was irresponsible, fake social media posts suggesting I had issues with money and trust. Then it got worse, he began sending copies of forged documents to distant relatives, hinting that I had taken money from him. People I hadn't spoken to in years were texting, calling, or showing up at my door with concerned, judgmental expressions. I can't even begin to describe the exhaustion. Imagine being trapped in a storm where the rain isn't just outside, it's in every text, every phone call, every glance from someone who used to be on your side. My own parents were now passive observers, offering cautious advice that felt more like condemnation. Joshua, maybe you're overreacting, my mom said, as if telling the truth about fraud and theft was some sort of moral failing. My dad didn't speak much, but the disappointment in his eyes spoke volumes. At work, things became almost surreal. My HR department flagged more discrepancies, some going back months. Purchases I didn't make, travel expenses I didn't authorize. Thomas somehow managed to link parts of my personal information to my corporate accounts. My boss, once someone who trusted me implicitly, began asking pointed questions. Joshua, I need to understand these charges. It doesn't look right. I explained everything, my voice steady but my hands trembling, and he looked at me like I was spinning a story. It didn't matter that I had documentation, that the bank had verified fraud. It sounded like excuses. Emotional weight hit hardest at home. Sarah tried to be strong, but the tension in our house was palpable. The kids were picking up on it, asking questions, sensing that something was wrong but not understanding why. One night, I'd overheard them talking quietly about Daddy's money problems, and I felt like I was failing in the most fundamental way as a father, as a protector. And then came the confrontation that left me questioning everything about morality, loyalty, and family. Thomas showed up at our house unannounced one afternoon. He was grinning like nothing had happened. He leaned against the doorframe and said, "So what's the plan? Going to sue me? Call the cops?" I felt my blood pressure spike. "Thomas, I've tried being reasonable. You've stolen from me, forged documents, manipulated my accounts. This ends now." He smirked. "You're acting like I did something terrible. You always did overreact. Maybe this is a lesson in humility." Humility. The word echoed in my mind. Humility. My own brother thinks stealing thousands of dollars, forging my signature, and ruining my life is a lesson for me. My hand shook. I wanted to hit something, scream, shake him until he understood, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not in front of the kids. Not in front of Sarah. The fallout wasn't immediate. But in the days after, whispers started. Neighbours, family, friends, coworkers all began questioning my response to Thomas. Some said I was too harsh, others that I was overprotective. Even Sarah, supportive as she is, admitted one night, quietly, "Josh, maybe there's a way to handle this without escalating further." And I get it. I understand the concern. But part of me thinks if I back down now, Thomas wins entirely. Then, the whistleblower from the bank called again. She revealed more about the level of coordination involved. Thomas wasn't acting alone. The manager and possibly a few colleagues were actively helping him. The realization made me sick. This wasn't a simple moral lapse by an 18-year-old, it was a premeditated, collaborative effort to undermine me. I started questioning my own judgment. Am I overreacting by pursuing legal action? Am I being vindictive by standing firm? Or am I finally doing what's necessary to protect myself and my family? Every side of me argues differently. And when I look at Thomas, that smirk, that casual defiance, it's maddening, because he truly believes he's the victim in this story. And that's the hardest part, trying to reconcile the brother I once loved, the one I bought toy cars for, with the manipulative, calculated fraudster standing in front of me. Every decision feels like a moral minefield. I want justice, but at what cost? Every step I take seems to deepen the rift, and the more I fight, the more people seem to believe I'm the bad guy. I can't tell where right ends and wrong begins anymore. By now, I realize I couldn't fight Thomas alone. The emotional toll was unbearable, and the isolation was crushing. I started gathering evidence, documenting every transaction, every forged signature, every text and email he'd sent. It felt almost obsessive, but I had no other choice. Without proof, I would be painted as the aggressor. Sarah became my anchor in this process. Nights were spent going over bank statements, screenshots, and notarized records, making sure everything was meticulously logged. She reminded me to breathe, reminded me that we weren't alone even if it felt like the world was against us. Some nights, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if my meticulous record-keeping was enough to counter the narrative Thomas had been building for months. Meanwhile, Thomas continued to manipulate perceptions. He posted subtle, cryptic messages on social media, painting me as controlling and paranoid. People would comment, expressing sympathy for him, questioning if I was overreacting or too harsh. My parents, despite everything, still advised caution, framing my actions as extreme. My dad even said, "Joshua, maybe you need to step back, you're making Thomas look bad." Step back. After everything he'd done? The breaking point came when Thomas showed up at a neighborhood community event. He approached several neighbors, whispering that I had gone off the rails over minor financial issues, subtly spinning the story that I was paranoid and aggressive. Some people I'd known for years gave me awkward glances, clearly unsure who to believe. I confronted him later that day. "Thomas, what are you doing? You're twisting the truth. People are starting to doubt me." He shrugged. "Relax, Josh, this is your problem, not mine. Everyone always assumed I was innocent. Now it's just reinforcing what they already think." I couldn't even articulate the anger I felt. It wasn't just a theft anymore, it was a calculated effort to turn everyone against me. Then came a small victory. A family friend, Mark, who had witnessed Thomas attempting to forge documents in his room months earlier, finally came forward. He corroborated the whistleblower's account from the bank and confirmed that Thomas had been planning this over time. Mark's statement gave me a sense of relief I hadn't felt in weeks. I finally had someone who believed me outside of Sarah and my lawyer. Despite that, the emotional impact on me was undeniable. My depression medication remained ineffective, and I could feel the tension in every corner of my life. Even mundane tasks helping my kids with homework, grocery shopping, or just having a conversation felt exhausting. My mind was constantly replaying scenarios, questioning every decision. Was I overreacting? Was I being petty? Was this fight worth it if it meant losing the support of my parents and the community? At work, things didn't improve either. HR continued to flag my accounts, citing anomalies linked to Thomas's fraud. My boss avoided direct confrontation, but looked at me with what I can only describe as wariness. I felt trapped in a web of accusations I didn't deserve, constantly having to justify my actions and defend my integrity. Through it all, I tried to maintain perspective. Thomas's age, his possible desperation, and his own struggles were factors I couldn't ignore. I knew he was manipulative, yes, but he was also just 18, trying to navigate a world he didn't fully understand. That made me question my own morality. Was pursuing this relentlessly me being the responsible adult, or was I being vindictive, seeking punishment for someone who's still a kid? I kept coming back to that thought. If I let this slide, would it embolden him? Or if I pressed on, would I destroy what's left of our relationship and maybe my parents' perception of me? Every choice seemed like a moral gamble. And through all of this, one thing was clear: I couldn't trust Thomas. Not with money, not with honesty, not with perception. Yet I couldn't help hoping, however faintly, that some part of him would realize the weight of what he'd done. I still don't know which way to turn. Every day feels like a balancing act between standing firm and being swallowed by the chaos Thomas has created. Every interaction with him or our family threatens to tilt the scales in the wrong direction. I'm not sure how much longer I can endure this limbo of fear, doubt, and moral ambiguity. By the time Part 9 rolls around in my life, I felt like I was losing control of everything I had worked for. Thomas's antics weren't just financial anymore, they were psychological warfare. Every time I spoke to someone in the family, there was a subtle accusation hidden behind their words, a look of doubt when I mentioned the forged documents, the bank fraud, the stolen money. Even people I trusted implicitly, friends, distant relatives, neighbours, were starting to hesitate, unsure which side to believe. At work, HR escalated the issue further. They requested a full audit of my accounts linked to the company, citing a pattern of suspicious activity. I tried to explain, calmly, that my brother had been committing fraud in my name, providing documentation and even a whistleblower's statement from the bank. But it was like talking to a wall. The HR manager kept repeating the same line: "We need you to clarify these discrepancies immediately." I could see the subtle judgment in my boss's eyes too, the quiet skepticism that made me feel like a stranger in my own life. The pressure bled into my marriage. Sarah tried her best to be supportive, but she was stretched thin. Nights were spent reviewing accounts, calling banks, consulting a lawyer. During the day, she had to manage the kids and household responsibilities while also trying to hold me together. There were moments I caught her looking at me with quiet fear, whispering, "What if this never ends? What if we lose everything?" Those words crushed me because I didn't have an answer. I wanted to reassure her, but how do you reassure someone when the ground beneath you keeps shifting? Meanwhile, Thomas's manipulations became more brazen. He started contacting friends and posting cryptic messages online, subtly painting me as controlling and irrational. One post on a college forum he frequented claimed I had pushed too hard and couldn't handle the truth. It didn't matter that the post was misleading or false, people reacted emotionally. Comments rolled in, some supportive of him, some confused, some quietly critical of me. Every message made my chest tighten. I felt like my identity was being rewritten in real time. I remember one particular morning vividly. I walked into the kitchen, bleary-eyed from another sleepless night, and my youngest was quietly stacking toy cars, the same ones I'd given Thomas years ago. I thought of how I'd once been proud to watch them play, the joy of buying those little vehicles and imagining a world of innocence. Now, it felt like a cruel reminder of everything that had gone wrong, a metaphor for how something meant to bring happiness had become a source of tension and betrayal. I confronted Thomas over the phone again. I tried to keep calm. "Thomas, this has gone too far. I am not just talking about money anymore. You're actively destroying my life, my career, my family's peace." He laughed. "You sound dramatic. I'm just standing up for myself. Everyone already thinks you're the bad guy anyway." And he wasn't wrong. Everyone was starting to see me as the villain. My parents, who had once relied on me to be the strong one, now suggested I'd dial it back. My aunt texted, "Joshua, sometimes you need to pick your battles. Are you sure this is worth it?" I wanted to scream. Pick my battles. He stole thousands of dollars, forged legal documents, and manipulated a bank. And yet the emotional reality was undeniable. If I pressed forward, I risked alienating my family even further. If I didn't, I risked losing my financial security, my career, and the stability of my household. The emotional toll was crushing. Nights were sleepless. My depression medication was useless, my patience worn thin, and my temper fraying. I found myself snapping at Sarah and the kids over minor irritations, guilt gnawing at me afterward. I felt like I was failing in every possible role: father, husband, son, brother. And through it all, Thomas smiled. Not literally, but in every text, every social media post, every sly comment to family, I could sense that he was confident that, no matter what I did, he'd win the narrative. That knowledge alone was suffocating. At this point, I realized something. This wasn't just about money, or legal consequences, or even betrayal. This was about power control over perception, over truth, over who people believed. And I was trapped in a story that I didn't even recognize as my own. I'm not sure how much longer I can navigate this labyrinth of moral ambiguity, deception, and fractured trust. Every step forward feels like a gamble, every conversation a potential landmine. And the part that terrifies me the most? I'm genuinely unsure if I'm doing the right thing anymore. By the time Part 10 hits, I knew I had to be more strategic. Sitting back and hoping Thomas would slip up wasn't going to work anymore. The man or kid, depending on how you look at it, was calculating. Every day brought a new complication, a new manipulation, a new threat to my finances, career, or sanity. I started keeping a log of everything. Bank statements, text messages, emails, social media posts, even casual remarks Thomas made around our family. I printed them all, organized them in chronological order, and began annotating. I figured if I was going to protect myself and my family, I needed to approach this like evidence in a courtroom, because in a sense, that's exactly what it had become. Sarah was invaluable during this period. She acted as a second pair of eyes, double-checking the document, offering emotional support when I was at my breaking point. But even she admitted one night, softly, "Josh, you can't control how other people see this. You can only control your actions." I nodded, but it didn't stop the anxiety from tightening its grip around my chest. Thomas, of course, didn't sit quietly while I strategized. He continued to manipulate perceptions, this time targeting external authorities. The local credit bureau received complaints from him, claiming I was mismanaging accounts, making unauthorized withdrawals, and even harassing him. My phone rang constantly with automated alerts, emails from investigators asking for clarifications, and subtle but judgmental messages from neighbors and acquaintances who didn't know the full story. I remember one morning, at precisely 7:12 a.m., Sarah and I were in the kitchen drinking coffee when the latest email arrived. It was from a collection agency demanding immediate payment for a loan Thomas had opened in my name. I froze. My hand shook. The sense of being trapped, of having every boundary breached, was suffocating. Later that day, I tried to confront him over text, trying to remain calm and factual. "Thomas, I need you to stop this. It's illegal. You've already caused enough damage. I am documenting everything, and if it continues, there will be consequences." His reply was infuriating in his casual cruelty. "Relax, Josh. You always make things bigger than they are. People will never believe you over me anyway. Chill." Every time he said things like that, it cut deeper than I wanted to admit. He was right in one sense. My family, extended relatives, even my neighbors were starting to doubt me. I felt like I was fighting against the tidal wave, and no matter what I did, I couldn't catch up. Work wasn't any easier. HR continued to flag suspicious charges tied to my name. I provided documentation, but each explanation seemed to create more doubt. My boss pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "Joshua, I need to know everything that's going on. There are discrepancies in your accounts, and this is starting to reflect poorly on the department." I explained, calmly but firmly, the situation with Thomas. I showed the evidence, the prints of forged signatures, the bank statements, even the whistleblower's testimony. My boss nodded, but there was a subtle skepticism in his expression, as if he couldn't completely reconcile the severity of Thomas's fraud with the chaos it had caused. At home, the tension was unbearable. Sarah tried to shield the kids, but the stress permeated every conversation. Even casual interactions felt loaded. I found myself constantly measuring my words, constantly on edge, wondering if the smallest misstep would give Thomas more ammunition. And then came the realization that made my blood run cold. Thomas wasn't just affecting me. He was starting to affect everyone around me. My family, my friends, my neighbors, even my coworkers, they were all beginning to doubt my character. And I was left wondering, if I pursued this aggressively, would I be protecting myself or creating irreparable damage to my relationships? At this point, I felt trapped in a moral labyrinth. Every decision carried weight. Every action risked alienating someone. Every confrontation risked further escalation. And through it all, Thomas remained disturbingly calm, confident in his ability to manipulate perceptions and bend reality to his advantage. I kept asking myself, am I doing the right thing by standing firm, documenting everything, preparing for legal action? Or am I overreacting, allowing anger and pride to dictate my actions? I don't know anymore. Every choice feels like a gamble, every move a potential misstep. And the worst part is, I can't even tell if I'm the protagonist or the villain in this story anymore. At this point, I was running on sheer adrenaline and caffeine. The stress, the sleepless nights, the constant phone calls, it was like a storm that refused to pass. Every day I dug deeper into Thomas's manipulations, compiling evidence, organizing bank statements, annotating screenshots, and recording every conversation I could. I told myself this wasn't about revenge, it was about survival, protecting my family, my career, my sanity. Yet even as I documented everything, Thomas kept finding ways to stay ahead. He somehow managed to get hold of certain notifications from my lawyer, giving him insights into what I was planning. Every time I thought I'd cornered him with evidence, he had a counter, an excuse, a distraction, or a half-truth to muddy the waters. It was exhausting, and it began to eat at me mentally. Family interactions became tense beyond measure. My parents, for all their intentions, refused to see him as anything more than an 18-year-old making mistakes. My mom kept saying, "You've always been too serious, Joshua, maybe he just needs a chance." My dad would nod silently, a heavy frown on his face, giving nothing away. Their refusal to acknowledge the gravity of the situation felt like betrayal. I tried to explain calmly, repeatedly, but their ears seemed closed. Thomas, of course, wasn't quiet either. He leaned into the narrative that I was being controlling, unreasonable, overbearing. He even managed to convince a cousin to question my motives, claiming, "Josh is always pushing people to extremes. You know how he is." Hearing that from someone I trusted almost broke me. I felt isolated, like I was fighting a battle where everyone else already had their alliances. At work, the pressure intensified. HR was requesting more documentation on unusual charges, and my boss was increasingly tense. Every email from corporate felt like a ticking time bomb. I wanted to scream at them, to tell them everything in vivid detail, to make them understand the severity, but I knew doing so might look like overreaction. I had to stay calm, collected, and professional, even as Thomas undermined me relentlessly. Even with Sarah, there were moments when my frustration slipped through. I'd snap over minor things, messy dishes, mislaid papers, and afterward, I'd feel immediate guilt. She tried to reassure me, but I could tell she was exhausted too. One night, she whispered, "Josh, maybe we need to accept that some things are out of our control." I wanted to argue, to fight, but I knew she was right in some sense. Yet surrendering felt impossible. Then a breakthrough came. One of Thomas's former dorm mates reached out, anonymously at first. He revealed that Thomas had been planning the forgery and theft long before I noticed the first transaction. The kid described how Thomas had taken screenshots, forged signatures, and even consulted online tutorials to make the forgeries convincing. Reading it, I felt a mix of relief and despair. Relief because there was now a third-party corroboration, despair because I realized the depth of Thomas's premeditation. I confronted him with this new information, trying to maintain control. Thomas, I know what you've been doing. I have witnesses, records, and documentation. You need to stop. This ends now. His reply was infuriating in its casualness. Relax, Josh. You're still the villain here in everyone else's eyes. Don't forget that. And he wasn't wrong. Family, friends, coworkers, they all still had doubts about me. Some thought I was overreacting. Some assumed I had personal motives, and some whispered that maybe Thomas had a point about me being controlling. I felt cornered, trapped, and constantly judged. Even as evidence stacked against him, the narrative Thomas spun continued to create moral ambiguity. Part of me wanted to scream, to call the police, to ensure he faced real consequences. Another part of me wondered if pursuing this aggressively would permanently fracture my family and isolate me entirely. It was becoming impossible to tell right from wrong in my own life. Every step I took to protect myself and my family felt like it might also make me the villain. The weight of it all was crushing, yet I knew I couldn't stop. Not yet. Because if I did, Thomas would win entirely. By now, I was operating in a constant state of hyper-alert. Every notification, every email, every text felt like a potential landmine. Thomas's audacity had reached a new level. He wasn't just forging documents and opening accounts anymore, he was actively manipulating people to doubt me at every turn. Friends, extended family, neighbours, even some coworkers began asking subtle questions about my behaviour. The sense of being trapped in a cage I couldn't escape was suffocating. Sarah tried to keep the household afloat. Nights were spent reviewing records, preparing evidence packets, making sure our financial footprint was traceable and defensible. Even she'd admitted, quietly, that she was terrified. Josh, she said one evening, voice barely above a whisper, I don't know how much longer we can handle this, it's consuming everything. I wanted to reassure her, to say I had it under control, but truthfully, I didn't. Every day felt like another step deeper into a moral labyrinth I wasn't sure I'd ever exit. At work, HR kept pressing. Another audit. Another review of unusual activity. My boss approached me, voice calm but edged with concern. Joshua, I need to understand this fully. There are discrepancies, and it's reflecting on your department. Can we discuss this? I walked him through everything, showing evidence after evidence, but I could see the lingering doubt in his eyes. The documentation helped, but nothing erased the narrative Thomas was building outside these walls. Family interactions had devolved into tension-filled silence. My parents still refused to see Thomas's actions as deliberate fraud. He's just young, my mom insisted. Maybe you made a mistake. Mistake? Mistake is $5,000 in forged transactions and opened accounts in someone else's name. My dad didn't comment, but the frown on his face spoke volumes. Even Mark, the family friend who corroborated Thomas's scheming, admitted that he didn't know how to convince the rest of the family without creating further drama. Then came the tipping point. Thomas showed up at my house and announced, smug as ever. He leaned against the doorway and said, so, this lawyer thing, you're really going to drag me into it? Everyone's already on my side. I could feel my hands shaking. I wanted to yell, to throw him out, to scream until he understood the gravity of his actions, but I knew that losing control could make me look like the bad guy. So I forced myself to speak calmly. Thomas, this ends now. You've done enough. You've stolen money, forged signatures, and manipulated people. I've documented everything. The authorities will know the truth. He smirked and bawled. Truth, Josh, truth is what people believe, and right now, they believe me. That hit harder than anything else. It wasn't just that he had done something wrong, it was that he had turned reality into a weapon, and the world was following his lead. Over the next week, the situation intensified. Notices from banks, HR emails, and subtle but cutting remarks from relatives came in waves. Even Sarah admitted that the stress was affecting her sleep. My kids started noticing, asking questions about why I looked worried all the time. I tried to shield them, to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but the weight of it all was omnipresent. In the midst of this chaos, I continued building my case. I contacted the whistleblower again, collected more evidence, and spoke to the lawyer about filing an official complaint with the bank and possibly pursuing criminal charges. Each step forward was fraught with moral conflict. Part of me worried about permanently alienating Thomas, destroying our relationship entirely. Another part knew I couldn't let him get away with this. My family's financial security and my career were at stake. Looking back, I can see where things became morally grey. Yes, Thomas did everything wrong. Yes, he manipulated and betrayed. But my relentless pursuit, my constant questioning, my frustration spilling into the household, it wasn't perfect either. Maybe I was letting anger dictate my actions more than reason. Maybe, in their eyes, I was becoming the antagonist. I don't even know if I'm making sense anymore. The line between right and wrong has blurred beyond recognition. Every choice feels like a gamble with consequences that ripple far beyond my control. And through it all, Thomas remains calm, confident, almost untouchable. Every document I gather, every legal step I take, seems to be anticipated and counted in subtle ways I can't always predict. I'm exhausted. I'm terrified. And I'm not sure how much longer I can navigate this maze without losing myself completely. By the time part 13 arrives, I was at the breaking point. Months of sleepless nights, tension-filled days, and constant surveillance of Thomas's movements had left me frayed and hollowed out. I was living in a state of perpetual anxiety, constantly calculating his next move and trying to stay 2 steps ahead, but the weight of responsibility, both moral and familial, was crushing me. I remember one evening, sitting in the living room, surrounded by stacks of bank statements, notarized documents, and printed emails. Sarah was beside me, exhausted but unwavering. Josh, she said quietly, you can't keep carrying all of this alone, but you can't stop either. Whatever happens, we face it together. Her words were meant to comfort me, but they only made me realize the magnitude of what was at stake. The kids were asleep upstairs, and I kept thinking about how this all started. The toy cars I bought for Thomas years ago, the expensive wine from our anniversary Sarah had opened months ago, small, seemingly insignificant details that now felt like anchor points in a storm of chaos. I thought back to the smell of disinfectant in the hospital during last Christmas, when I first noticed strange withdrawals from my account. At 2:30 p.m, I'd called the bank, trying to understand what had happened to an $89 grocery bill that never existed. That was the first sign, and yet I didn't act fast enough. Thomas, meanwhile, had been audacious in ways that made my skin crawl. He wasn't just forging signatures, he was manipulating perception. Friends, family, even neighbours had been subtly influenced to see me as the unreasonable one. The realization that he had the power to twist reality so completely was infuriating and deeply unsettling. I knew I had to confront him. Not in anger, not in desperation, but with strategy and evidence. I set up a meeting at my parents' house under the guise of a family discussion, hoping to keep the moral high ground and ensure witnesses were present. My plan was meticulous: printouts of all transactions, annotated screenshots, sworn statements from the whistleblower, even notes from Thomas's former dorm mate. I wanted there to be no ambiguity. When the day arrived, I was trembling not from fear, exactly, but from the tension of holding everything in check. Thomas arrived, smirking, carrying himself with a kind of confidence that only someone completely unrepentant can muster. So what's all this? He asked, feigning innocence. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Thomas, this ends today. We need to go through this, step by step. I have documentation of everything. Forged signatures, stolen money, accounts you opened under my name. I've got witnesses, bank statements, and even emails that show how deliberate this was. He leaned back, arms crossed, and smiled. Josh, you really think you can prove anything? Everyone already believes me. They'll never side with you. I felt my chest tighten. He wasn't wrong. Months of gaslighting, manipulation, and narrative control had set the stage. Family members were already tense, my parents visibly conflicted, unsure of where to place their loyalty. But I had to try. I laid out the evidence systematically, showing how every transaction was fraudulent, how the timeline of events pointed directly to him, and how the bank had inadvertently enabled his schemes. I saw Sarah nod, quietly proud of the calm and methodical way I presented the case. Then, my parents finally spoke. My mum's voice wavered. Josh, we see it. We believe you. My dad was silent, but his eyes softened slightly. It wasn't complete vindication, but it was enough to feel like a crack in the wall Thomas had built. Thomas didn't flinch. You'll never prove I did it, he said softly. His tone carried the chilling confidence of someone untouchable in his own mind. I felt a surge of emotion, rage, frustration, fear, but I forced myself to stay composed. I knew yelling, pleading, or breaking down would only make me look weak. And yet, inside, I was literally shaking. Every nerve in my body was on fire. The room was tense, thick with the weight of history, betrayal, and moral ambiguity. No one knew how this would end. I could feel the eyes of my parents, Sarah, even Thomas, all waiting, judging, questioning. For a moment, I wondered, am I the bad guy for taking this to the limit? Am I justified in seeking accountability? Or am I overreacting, letting pride and anger dictate my actions? I don't have the answer. All I know is that I can't turn back now. Not when so much is at stake financially, emotionally, morally. Not when Thomas has shown he won't stop until someone forces him to. And so I prepared for the final confrontation, knowing it could either repair what was left of my life or shatter everything entirely. The day of the final confrontation felt surreal. I remember waking up, heart pounding, palms sweaty, and a sense of dread crawling through me like a living thing. Months of planning, sleepless nights, legal research, and emotional turmoil all led to this. I had printed every document, annotated every screenshot, and even rehearsed my words in the mirror to stay calm. But nothing could have prepared me for the tension of facing Thomas while my parents and Sarah were in the room, silently watching. He arrived at precisely 3:00 p.m, leaning against the doorframe with that same smug expression he always wore. I could feel the adrenaline spike in my chest. I had to hold it together. I couldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Josh, he said casually, as if nothing had happened, so all this evidence, you really think it changes anything? I took a deep breath and laid out everything systematically. Forged signatures, fraudulent withdrawals, accounts opened under my name, manipulated records, witness statements, even corroboration from the bank whistleblower and his former dormmate. I explained each point calmly, detailing dates, amounts, and how his actions affected not only me but my family and career. Thomas leaned back, crossing his arms, smirk unwavering. You're dramatic. People will still see this as you overreacting. Everyone already thinks I'm innocent. I felt a surge of frustration, but stayed composed. Thomas, this isn't about who looks innocent, it's about truth. He stole money, forged documents, and put my livelihood at risk. The evidence is undeniable. My parents were tense. My mum's eyes were glossy, uncertain, and my dad sat silently, jaw tight. I could feel the weight of their judgment, the fear of their disappointment. Yet I pressed on, knowing I had to show the man myself that I was acting not out of anger but necessity. Then came the emotional peak. Thomas's expression faltered for a fraction of a second. He didn't apologize, didn't flinch completely, but I saw the smallest crack in his armor. It was subtle, but it gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, he recognized the gravity of what he'd done. I glanced at Sarah. She nodded slightly, a quiet gesture of support. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the release of months of pent-up stress and emotion. The room felt charged, heavy with tension, moral ambiguity, and years of family history unraveling in real time. The fallout from that confrontation was immediate. My parents admitted, finally, that they hadn't fully understood the extent of Thomas's actions. They expressed regret for doubting me, though I could see lingering discomfort and divided loyalty in their eyes. Some extended family members still questioned my motives, believing I might have been too harsh or overzealous, but others, friends who had observed everything, expressed equivocal support. Thomas didn't apologize. He didn't acknowledge wrongdoing in the way I wanted. Instead, he retreated, still smug but visibly unsettled. I realized that even when people are caught in undeniable evidence, acknowledgement isn't guaranteed. That was a harsh, painful lesson. The aftermath left me drained. My depression medication had finally started working again, but the emotional fatigue lingered. I watched my kids play with their toy cars in the living room, the smell of disinfectant from the hospital that lingered in my memory now replaced by a faint smell of the anniversary wine Sarah had opened months ago. Small details anchored me to reality, reminding me that life goes on, even after betrayal. I spent the next few days reflecting. Part of me feels justified, proud that I stood my ground, collected evidence, and confronted my brother despite the emotional and moral complexity. Another part of me wonders if I went too far, if the relentless pursuit made me the villain in the eyes of some, especially those who didn't see the full picture. The moral ambiguity is still there. Thomas is my brother, still just 18, and while his actions were criminal and manipulative, he's also my family. My parents, friends, and Sarah all have nuanced opinions, and the division is still palpable. I don't know if I'm the hero, the villain, or something in between. I only know that I did what I thought was necessary to protect my family, my livelihood, and myself. I'm genuinely confused about whether